kimono. So this is called Hyphenated Americans. And I begin it with a haiku. A faraway war, angry words pelt like bullets, the battle brought home. Imagine risking your life for a country that put your family behind barbed wire because they looked like the enemy. My mother's oldest brother, Yoshio Sasaki, a Japanese American, served in the United States Army while his family was interned. For heroic achievement while in action in Italy, he was awarded the Bronze Star. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Sasakis, as well as all Japanese Americans on the West Coast, were classified as enemy aliens and were forced to sell or give away their belongings in preparation for relocation. Approximately 120,000 Japanese Americans were relocated to internment camps in California, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Arkansas. The Sasaki family was sent to Tule Lake Relocation Center in California. Later, they were moved again, this time to Topaz Relocation Camp in Utah. Still, my uncle enlisted in the Army and served honorably. Following is an excerpt from the recommendation for award written to Uncle Yoshio's commanding officer on June 19, 1945. I need my glass. To Commanding Officer, 442nd Regimental Combat Team. Number 1. Under the provisions of Army Regulation 600-45, as amended, it is recommended that Yoshio Sasaki, Sergeant, Company E, 442nd Regimental Combat Team Infantry, be awarded the Bronze Star Medal. Number 2. Detailed description of action. On 23 April 1945, the 3rd Platoon of Company E was leading element of the attack on San Terenzo, Italy. Although they received some enemy fire, the platoon entered the lower sector of the town and made an encircling movement around the hill to engage the enemy from the rear. As the leading elements of the platoon reached a point directly behind the town, they were pinned down by withering fire from enemy machine guns and rifles from the front and the left front. The men took what cover and concealment the terrain afforded and returned fire. During the engagement, one of the men was wounded and lay exposed to enemy observation and further fire. Sergeant Sasaki left his position of comparative safety and ran 25 yards in the face of intense enemy fire to aid the wounded man. Despite bullets whizzing by him constantly, Sergeant Sasaki administered first aid and dragged his wounded comrade to covered position. After making the wounded man as comfortable as possible, Sergeant Sasaki resumed firing at the enemy. Because of his courage and fearless action with disregard for his personal safety, the wounded man was spared much suffering and later safely evacuated to an aid station. Sergeant Sasaki's gallant action is exemplary of the best traditions of the armed forces of the United States. In an excerpt from my uncle's journal, he wrote about 5 Japanese Americans from his platoon who were killed in action on that day, April 23, 1945. These men fought, even sacrificed their lives for the United States, regardless of the fact their government considered their families enemy aliens. Recently, I visited the Japanese American Museum in Los Angeles, where there's a monument titled "Go for Broke," the motto of the 442nd. Engraved on the front of the large black curved tribute is a quote by President Truman, taken from a speech given to Japanese American veterans upon their return from war. You not only fought the enemy, you fought prejudice and won. Sunshine from the cloudless day warmed me as I strolled the circular walk to the back of the monument, where engraved are the names of over 16,000 Japanese Americans who served in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the 100th Infantry Battalion, and the lesser-known Military Intelligence Service. I had already searched the site's computer database for the location of my uncle's name. Still, I walked along the wall, scanning through thousands of names, wondering about the stories of each of the men. When I found my uncle's name, I stared at it, then closed my eyes. Like the 8mm movies he used to film, memories of my kind, gentle, and honorable uncle flashed like a motion picture in my mind. I pressed my hand against his name, surprised at the contrast of coolness to the warm day. What thoughts must have gone through his head as he fought for a country that relocated his family to internment camps? How did it feel to return from battle and have to be issued a pass by armed guards before going into the camps to visit their families? Most of all, how did it feel for an intern family to learn they'd lost a loved one in battle? My grandparents were from Japan, Issei, first generation. Due to the Naturalization Act of 1790, they were not allowed to become American citizens. My mother and her siblings, Nisei, second generation, were born American citizens. However, during my childhood, neither my mother nor her family spoke about internment or the war, perhaps because they, like many Japanese Americans, were too ashamed, or perhaps it was too painful a period to relive. Maybe it was simply their attitude of shikata ga nai, resigned acceptance. As Sansei, third generation, I feel a responsibility to remember this history and to remind others that approximately 14,000 Japanese American men who enlisted and served with the 442nd were Americans too. The 442nd became the most decorated unit in United States military history for its size and length of service, with more than 9,000 Purple Hearts and more than 4,000 Bronze Stars awarded. They, like all American veterans, hyphenated or not, deserve to be remembered, honored, and respected.